Good afternoon. I'm Savannah Kelly. Welcome to APTN National News. First Nations children living on reserve in Manitoba are now eligible for Children's Disability Services and home care after a 14-year legal battle. Sav Jonesa reports.
In 2010, Harriet Sumner Pruden and her son, Dewey, sought to make change through a complaint to the Manitoba Human Rights Commission, or MHRC. Dewey, who was only 8 years old at the time, needed access to provincial disability-related services like home care and physiotherapy. But because he lived on their reserve of Penamutang First Nation, Dewey was often denied or delayed that help by the Manitoba government. In 2014, Harriet said she knew they weren't alone in their struggle with discrimination.
It's still a long battle, but I'm hoping within his lifetime, things change.
Now, after 14 years of determination, those eligibility restrictions have finally come to an end, thanks to a settlement agreement between the Manitoba government, the MHRC, and Dewey's family. It comes with two main commitments from the province: to expand children's disability services and home care eligibility to First Nations children living on reserve, and to create a working group with federal and First Nations governments to see how those services can be best delivered. Harriet says she feels relieved that what she set out to fix has now been resolved and looks forward to the working group's findings.
I don't have any concerns at all because I know it includes our First Nations and also with both federal and provincial governments. So, we're at a time where the topic of reconciliation is on the table, and I hope, it moves forward in a positive way.
The Manitoba Human Rights Commission's Executive Director, Karen Sharma, says that dialogue is necessary to address the disparity in services First Nations communities face.
And we think that's an important component as well, because of course we want to make sure that First Nations children living in Manitoba have access to the supports that they're entitled to, but we need to go a step further to improve the supports that are out there and also better align those supports with the right to self-determination. There's a commitment for that to be taking place over the coming couple of years, and a requirement that reporting occur to our commission. Will be sort of monitoring that taking place every 6 months, so that we can see that there's been real progress toward that commitment to really ensure that the services and supports that are needed for First Nations children are happening in Manitoba.
Now, little Dewey is an adult, 22 years old, and will no longer directly benefit from the change. Still living in Penamutang, Harriet says her son continues to have difficulties in accessing services near their community, roughly 220 kilometers north of Winnipeg.
They don't have the same resources, as any other, with home care, I'd have to look deeper into that, I guess, because, we do have limited resources in our communities, our First Nation communities.
She says Dewey signing the settlement agreement reminded them of their ancestor, former Penamutang chief Richard Woodhouse, who was a signatory of Treaty 2.
I always hear that echoing in my mind, them speaking to me and saying, be resilient and keep moving forward.
Harriet says she is thankful to the Public Interest Law Centre and MHRC for their continued support all these years. Sav Jonesa, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
It's been 13 years since Tanya Neepanak from the Pine Creek First Nation went missing in Winnipeg. Her family has never stopped fighting for justice. Yesterday, on her birthday, Neepanak's family and a community of supporters held a walk and feast in Winnipeg to honor her life and demand action for MMIWG2S. Reporter Sierra Bettens brings you to the walk.
On what would have been her 45th birthday, dozens gathered to honor Tanya Neepanak, who went missing 13 years ago. In downtown Winnipeg, calls to search for Neepanak are spray painted on sidewalks. Marchers wore red to honor all missing and murdered Indigenous women, girls, and two-spirited people. Her aunt, Sue Caribou, handed out Justice for Tanya shirts created in her honor.
I have a lot of mixed feelings today. I'm overwhelmed because it's been a long time since we celebrated Tanya's birthday, and today is so emotional for me.
Nipinak was a member of the Pine Creek First Nation in northwestern Manitoba. She was last seen on September 13th, 2011. The then 31-year-old left her home on Sherbrooke Street to walk to a pizza place around the block and was never seen again. In June 2012, Sean Lamb was charged with second-degree murder in connection to Nipinak's disappearance, but those charges were later stayed. At the Thursday walk, Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs, Acting Grand Chief Betsy Kennedy, remembered attending the first march held for Nipinak over a decade ago.
And I was with family when they went to the Brady landfill a number of years ago. So that's the reason why I'm here today, is to provide and let the family know that I still think about her all the time.
As the community came together to sing happy birthday and offer medicines to Nipinak's family, her aunt voiced her demands for justice.
Most of our missing and murdered are probably at these landfills, just like the unmarked graves. So I think they should search all the landfills and consider the landfills as a crime scene and stop putting trash on our loved ones. They're not trash.
Sierra Bettens, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
A new piece of legislation was tabled in the House of Commons yesterday. It's called Bill C-77, and it will create a commissioner for modern treaty implementation. That person will ensure governments now and in the future uphold modern treaty obligations. Crown Indigenous Relations Minister Gary Ananda-Sangari shared the stage with several First Nations leaders who all support the establishment of this type of commissioner that will be independent of government and report to it like an Auditor General. But Ananda-Sangari was asked if Bill C-77 will be passed by Parliament because the Liberal government is currently accusing the Conservative Party of obstruction, which they say is preventing House business from proceeding smoothly.
You know, this bill didn't start a few weeks ago. This started 20 years ago as the demands of treaty partners to ensure that there is accountability. It's important that our government and any future governments do not politicize the relationship with treaty partners. And I believe that this is a moment for all parties to come together to support the bill.
We're always looking for your feedback or story ideas. Here's how you can continue the conversation. If you have a story you want to share, send us an email to news@aptn.ca. To read and watch our stories, visit our website at aptnnews.ca. You can find us online on your favorite social media sites, including TikTok, YouTube, LinkedIn, and X. Follow APTN News to join the conversation and see our latest stories. After the break, we'll bring you a story about Indigenous sovereignty from our friends at NITV in Australia. Welcome back to APTN National News. More than a dozen tribal groups from around Australia have come together in Queensland to discuss forming their own sovereign governments. As Carly Willis from NITV Australia reports, some have begun discussions with foreign powers like China to invest in their communities.
Leaders from 13 tribal groups met recently in Gimoy, Cairns. The inaugural forum was hosted by North Queensland's Yidinji sovereign government, which renounced ties with Australia a decade ago.
The intention behind the forum is to get all the tribes an opportunity to get their houses in order. If they want to govern themselves, that is. It's a lot of work.
Now, Cape York and Torres Strait leaders say it's time to take charge of their affairs through their own sovereign government structures.
We are sick and tired of being trodden on the wine press, being oppressed by the system, by your own people, the apartheid mentality. This is reality. We've got to face up to reality sometime.
Indigenous sovereignty is not recognised under Australian law, due largely to the lack of a national treaty with Indigenous peoples. The forum heard that Indigenous statehood brings international investment interests from world powers like China.
We met Chinese investors. They come and they're willing to help us move forward very fast, no games.
Leaders say they've been calling on the Australian government to help them protect significant sites, such as Pajinka, known as the tip of Cape York, which are coming under great tourism pressure.
We have to step out of the block, and we have to ask somebody to come and do it, because our people are getting old, our children have no interest. We have to have outcome on our projects before they lose their interest.
Hopes of building a better future for generations to come. Carly Willis, NITV News.
Now we want to give you a recap of this week's web poll questions. Do you believe the Red Dress Alert program will help reduce the number of MMIWG2S plus cases? Yes, no, or unsure. How much confidence do you have in Canada's criminal justice system? High, moderate, low, or no confidence? And how much trust do you have in the federal government's handling of environmental issues affecting Indigenous communities? High, moderate, low, or no trust? You can weigh in on these questions by visiting our website, aptnnews.ca. Next week, Chiefs will vote on the future of Child and Family Services. Coming up, we speak with APTN National Chief Cindy Woodhouse-Neepanak about the vote on the $47.8 billion settlement package. Over on the East Coast, 12 degrees for Halifax, plus 11 for St. John's. Nain, rainy and 5 degrees, Kuujjuaq, plus 6. Saguenay, sunshine and 10 degrees there, St. Gilles, plus 11. Sarnia, sunshine and 9 there, North Bay, plus 12. Kapuskasing, sunny and 11 degrees, Thunder Bay, plus 17. Churchill, 3 degrees there, Norway House, sunshine and 6 degrees. Winnipeg, sunny and 9, Barons River, plus 9 as well. Regina, mix of sun and cloud, 2 degrees, North Battleford, 0 degrees. Stony Rapids, -3 and sunny, Buffalo Narrows, plus 5. Sunshine and 11 degrees for Fort McMurray and Peace River. 12 degrees in Calgary, Medicine Hat, sunny and 19. 14 in Penticton, Bella Coola, plus 15. Prince George, 11 degrees there, Dease Lake, snowy and 7 degrees. Watson Lake, rainy and 6, Rock River, plus 4. Wrigley, mostly sunny, 5 degrees there, Yellowknife, rainy and 5. Colville Lake, 2 degrees there, Sax Harbor, snowy and plus 1. Baker Lake, snowy, 0 degrees, Now Yet, plus 4. Arctic Bay, 0 degrees and sunny there, Iqaluit, plus 3. Next week, chiefs from across Canada will meet in Calgary for a vote on the future of Child and Family Services. On the table at the Assembly of First Nations Special Assembly is a $47.8 billion package from the federal government. But the agenda also includes resolutions to reject, delay, or renegotiate that final settlement agreement. For more on what's at stake, Dennis Ward spoke with the National Chief of the APTN, Cindy Woodhouse-Neepanak.
National Chief, thanks for being with us. You've spent the last few months really crisscrossing the country, meeting with nations on this $47.8 billion package to reform Child and Family Services. What have you been hearing out there?
Certainly, look, it's been a whirlwind. It's been busy. I know late night flights, early mornings, and it's to visit with and talk to our people about probably one of the most important discussions that we'll ever have, and it's on our children. and it's always really fueled with passion right across the country. I think that it's a long overdue discussion that First Nations haven't had. And I know, as certainly the first mother to be a national chief, that it's one of the most important discussions that I think that I'll ever have, that we'll ever have in certainly my career in politics. And I hope that we try and get this right in a good way. And I know that it's always sensitive because it's about our kids and our kids on First Nations communities that continue to get taken away, taken off reserve, away from our language, away from our culture. And we've been hearing that from coast to coast to coast from First Nations. I want to thank First Nations communities from across this country who have invited me into their homes, into their communities, as we've had these really tough discussions. At the same time, I think there's a lot of support out there for this agreement to move ahead. Of course, people always want amendments, right? It's a huge agreement. It's many pages long, and we worked on those amendments. And thankfully, I can report today that what we've heard from chiefs in the past few months, we've changed in the agreement. We have a revised agreement this morning. Things like to make sure that there's regional representation now from across the country, making sure that every region has a voice at that table as we roll this out for the years ahead. And I think that that's a good thing. We've heard chiefs, and of course other, making sure that First Nations are better defined in the agreement, and the liability piece. Like, there's just so many pieces at this, so we made sure that we fix those so that chiefs are well informed for next week, and to make sure that they feel comfortable enough to proceed with this program piece. At the same time, I know that this is a floor. The 47.8 billion is a floor. It's a program, First Nations Child and Family Services program, and I know that we're switching a lot of these investments away from the provinces and organizations directly to First Nations. And I know that that's a big change from the way that things have normally been done. And I know that it's hard for entities, governments, this country to maybe move away and move towards a more First Nations-led approach. But First Nations are capable. They're not the ones that created this mess. Ever since governments have been in control of First Nations children and First Nations Child and Family Services matters, that's where we went wrong. Prior to that, First Nations, since time immemorial, have kept their children well, healthy, balanced with the land, with our language, waters, clean waters at that point. And it's only been since the time of residential schools, day schools, the 60s scoop, that we've seen the horrific assault on First Nations women and children through the child welfare system. And they're very intrusive, and they target us as mothers, and they target our children. And that has to stop in this country. I know that it's not an easy discussion at all. And everybody, I'm so thankful that for the first time in the history of this country, that we're having this hard conversation. And I'm glad for the passion that I've been hearing. And I'm glad for the amendments that have happened. And I know that I look forward to the discussion next week and getting, of course, direction from chiefs in assembly on will they accept the 47.8 billion, or will, they maybe want to go a different route. But at the end of the day, it's our communities know best, and we leave this up to our communities to decide.
National Chief, next week there are resolutions to accept the package from the federal government, but others that would delay the vote, outright reject it, or one calling to renegotiate it. What do you think is going to happen?
Look, I think that there's a move to certainly move forward. I believe in the chiefs. I believe in First Nations, that we're going to do the right thing. And I look forward to this discussion. We welcome, of course, APTN to join us there. You'll see, it'll be you're going to hear hurt people as well that have been hurt through that system. Unfortunately, as we've seen through the 23 billion compensation deal that we finished just a few months ago, we estimate that 300,000 First Nations people, like children within that system, and then of course, all the different classes, including parents, that's 300,000 directly affected So that means every single family has been affected by the child welfare system. And so we're going to hear passion speeches. We're going to hear, we're going to have a big discussion about this. And I'm so optimistic and I'm thankful that we're coming together in a good way. And I think that, of course, we'll make sure that if need be, that we'll have time in the evenings to work through resolutions if they need to be reworked to get to that place where we get to a good place where we're trying to move forward. But certainly you never hear that status quo is good enough. First Nations want to move in a different direction when it comes to child and family services. It's just too intrusive on our people. And we know, and our leaders know, that something needs to be done differently, because what we have right now and the system that we have right now is not working.
National Chief, what would be your concerns if this package is delayed or scrapped altogether?
I think I worry that the money doesn't get booked in Parliament, and I worry that we lose out on post-majority, for instance. Right now, the program's designed for when you're 18 years old and you're a day, say you turn 18 and you're a kid in care. Well, the next morning, the day after your 18th birthday, you enter extreme poverty. Mm-hmm. So I think with this new, final settlement agreement on child and family services, certainly it gives, us some leverage in First Nations. It gives kids post-majority supports up to age 26. And we give those kids a little bit of a hand up so that they don't enter poverty the day after their 18th birthday. And maybe this gives them some tools, and it's not perfect. I get it. I mean, I wish we could push that date even further, but of course, such as our negotiations, they're not always easy. But at the same time, we give these young people a chance to grow more, to thrive, and to find their way within society. Because right now we're creating broken people. And, so absolutely, like there's so much. And I think the other thing is, of course, the band rep program would be ripped apart. And I want to commend the Ontario First Nations. I know people can say that they've had probably the upper hand in this, and certainly they've been representatives as part of this. They've applied for intervener status many years ago on that. But I think that their 65 agreement included band rep support services across Ontario. The rest of the country doesn't have that. And so this agreement will extend to all those First Nations across the country to make sure that they have a rep from each First Nation when kids are in court or there's family matters, that we're not pushing children off reserve, or that we're not putting them in non-First Nations homes. So I know that there's lots of good things in this agreement. And of course, as you know, it's not a perfect agreement as well, right? We wish that it included, off reserve, for instance. And so big conversations. And certainly, of course, this doesn't take into account the provinces of this country that need to be held to account for their part in the racism in child welfare in this country. We can't let them off the hook.
National Chief, we'll have to leave it there, but of course we'll all be watching next week in Calgary. Thanks for taking some time.
Miigwech. Thank you.
And that's all the time we have for your afternoon news this Friday. Sav Jonesa will be back here in a few hours for your evening newscast. I'm Savannah Kelly. Marcy, Miigwech, thank you for joining us. Have a great afternoon.